Hi everyone, I'm Celine from Blue Calla Patterns, and in this video we're going to do the preparation, interfacing, and cutting for the Strawflower Convertible bag. The first thing I want to do before we start is talk a little bit about fabric choices. So I did put a little note in the pattern that for the exterior fabric, you're going to want to keep in mind that since the bag does fold when carried by the handles, you don't want to use anything for the exterior fabric that will retain wrinkles. So the one fabric that I would caution you against using is a quilt weight cotton. It will definitely show creases. Even a lightweight cotton canvas will a little bit, but not as bad. So this one here, I did use a cotton canvas, and it does show the creases a little bit, but not as much as a quilt weight cotton would show. So the preferred materials, of course, like I said, is a cotton canvas. And in this version, I actually use a printed waterproof canvas. Now, this one here handles the folding really, really well, bounces back, looks great. There's no wrinkles. So this is a great choice for a material for the exterior fabric. Now, just to make it clear, anything that you see in this metallic vinyl, that is your contrast fabric. And when I talk about exterior fabric, I'm talking about strictly this panel and this panel. So the two main panels on both sides of the bag. Now, this is a soft-bodied bag. This is not intended to be a very structured bag. So don't use any heavier weight interfacings than what is recommended in the pattern. So this one here, for example, it uses exactly what is recommended in the pattern, which is a fusible woven interfacing first applied to the exterior fabric on the wrong side. And then I added the fusible fleece on top of that. When you're using something like waterproof canvas, vinyl, cork fabric, there is no fusible woven interfacing. In fact, this bag here has no interfacing whatsoever, except for the piece of firm interfacing that I glued to the bottom here to give the bottom a little bit of structure. Especially important when you're adding purse feet like this. You don't want to just install those in fabric without any sort of interfacing or stabilizer. So this one does have the firm sew-in interfacing, and the cotton pieces that I used inside to make pockets. So I did use quilt weight cotton for the pocket linings. Those ones do have a lightweight, a woven fusible interfacing in a lightweight. Other than that, there is no interfacing whatsoever in this bag, and it holds up pretty well because of my choices. If you want to use cork fabric for your exterior fabric here, make sure that it is a natural based cork. So you cannot use any solid colors. It has to be a natural base. This one here, I got it from a specific cork supplier. I don't think many suppliers stock this particular cork, but it is extremely soft and pliable. So this is ideal for your exterior fabric. I'm going to show you a couple of other options. So here's another option for when I say a natural based cork. So the base of this print is a natural cork, and there's a design that has been printed on top. Again, very supple, and it will bounce back without any permanent creasing. So this is the type of cork you want to use. Don't use any of the solid dyed colors. They're much too stiff, and you will actually even have trouble folding the bag. And definitely it will not work. So another option you could use, if you're comfortable working entirely in vinyl or faux leather, that is a great option as well. So here, this faux leather, I did use it as the contrast, but it would have done an excellent job as the exterior fabric as well. So really, there's a lot of options. The only one that I would really advise against is a quilt weight cotton, unless you do not intend to ever carry the bag this way and you're just going to carry it over your shoulder or crossbody, whatever you decide for your strap length. So that is the only time that a quilt weight cotton would be okay to use. Now, one last piece of advice that I would like to add, only because I did encounter some issues when I made this bag, is to try to avoid fabrics that are stretchy. So I would avoid a vinyl that has any sort of stretch to it. And I actually discovered that this waterproof canvas had a little bit of stretch to it, which made it a little bit more difficult during the assembly. So if at all possible, try to avoid any fabrics with a lot of stretch. Otherwise, you may have a few difficulties because we need the corners to line up quite well here. Now, if you have another fabric material option that you would like to use, but you're not sure if it's going to work, go ahead and ask a question in the comments, and if I'm familiar with the material, I'll be able to help you out with that to see if it'll be a good choice for this bag. Using this bag as a model, we're going to go through the supply list. I'm going to show you where everything is located on the bag, and this can help you do your shopping for the bag. So the first thing you're going to need, like I just mentioned, is your exterior fabric. Now, keep in mind that all of the quantities that I've given you will change based on your fabric choices. It will also change based on the width of the fabric that you are purchasing. So you'll have to use your judgment. If it is narrower than what I've given you as an estimate, then you're going to have to buy a little more. If it's wider, then maybe a little bit less. In any case, I always recommend that you purchase extra of everything. I myself make a lot of mistakes when I'm cutting or even when I'm sewing and I need to recut some pieces. So I like to be on the safe side and buy a little bit extra. And then if I happen to have enough to make another project, fantastic. So the first thing you'll need is half a yard of your exterior fabric, assuming it is 42 inches wide. I can't remember. I think my waterproof canvas here was closer to 54 to 60 inches wide, so I didn't need quite as much. So half a yard or half a meter. Then for the contrast fabric, so that is what you see here. The handles, the little strap cuffs, and the exterior gusset. So that is all made from my contrast fabric. That is also half a yard or half a meter. Again, that's going to vary based on the width of your fabric. For your lining fabric, so the lining fabric is used inside of these two exterior zipper pockets, the main lining of your bag, so all of the zipper panel pieces here, the main panels here, the gusset pieces, and then your double slip pocket and the lining of your gusset zipper pocket that is inside the bag. All of that can be done with 1 yard or 0.9 meter of lining fabric. I would just go ahead and purchase a meter as well if you're working in metric. Now, the interfacing. This is also really going to change based on your choices. So if you're using what I'm using here, then you're not going to use hardly any fusible woven interfacing. You're only going to need it for your pocket lining. So you're going to need a lot less than what is suggested in the pattern. If you're going to be using a lot of interfacing, so for example, if your lining fabric is cotton fabric, I used waterproof canvas, which does not need interfacing. If you use cotton fabric, you're going to need to interface all of those pieces with a woven interfacing. If you're using canvas fabric, like what I used on the other bag, So on this one here, it's fusible, a woven fusible interfacing first, and then a fusible fleece. So if you're doing something similar, you're also going to need half a yard or half a meter of fusible fleece. Now, there are many brands of fusible fleece. I personally use Thermolam Plus because it's a bit more dense, so I like how it gives a bit more structure. Then you're going to need a firm sew-in stabilizer. I'm using Pellon Peltex. You can also use anything that is similar. Maybe you like to use Decaville Heavy. All of those will work. I use I glue mine in. So I use a sew-in, firm sew-in stabilizer. And you only need a small piece that is 9 inches by 6.5 inches. Now that is, if you're working in metric, that's 23 centimeters by 16.5 centimeters. And then the last thing you're going to need, now this is also optional, if you would like a bit more structure on your contrast pieces, so the 2 exterior zipper panels and the exterior gusset pieces, you can go ahead and use some heavyweight fusible interfacing. Now, if you're using a vinyl like I am, you're going to have to use a pressing cloth and maybe do a test on a little piece to make sure that the vinyl doesn't melt when you're trying to fuse anything to it. So if you do decide to use that, you will need half to 1 yard, really depending on what you've selected to do and what you've selected to use as your material. So that's going to vary quite a lot as well. So you will need half to 1 yard depending on your choices, or half a meter to almost 1 meter of that heavyweight fusible. Now, again, that is optional. So it depends on your choices and also how much structure you want. I decided not to use anything at all, and it works great for my bag because of the materials that I've selected here. In terms of notions and supplies, so this bag can be made with or without hardware. Obviously, this version here has no hardware whatsoever except for the purse feet, and even these are optional. So I decided to just use purse feet on this one and use no hardware at all on the strap. It just makes the bag very nice and lightweight, and also a lot less expensive to make. If budget is an issue for you, then this is a great choice. If you decide you want to use hardware, so once again, I'll just push this one out of the way. I always use purse feet because I really like them. And then you're going to need 2 1.5-inch O-rings and 2 1.5-inch swivel clasps. That's all you're going to need. So even if you do decide to use the hardware, there's really not that much hardware. For the shoulder strap, you can use a piece of webbing. So you'll need, this is really also a personal preference thing. If you're not sure, buy a little extra. But I made mine. I don't really need a very big crossbody strap, but I do wear mine crossbody. And I only used a 36-inch piece of 1.5-inch wide webbing. If you're working in metric, it is 38 millimeter wide webbing. And you're going to need anywhere from 91 to 110 centimeters of webbing approximately. So that is up to you. If you wish, you can use the contrast fabric to make that strap, and we're going to cover that while we're doing the assembly. We're going to go over how to do that. But if you have access to webbing, pretty webbing, it is such a time saver and makes a really nice looking strap. This is just a seatbelt webbing. Now, as I mentioned, the 4 purse feet are optional. And then zippers, you're going to need 1 15-inch or 38 centimeter piece of zipper tape with 1 single pull. And the zipper tape could be number 4.5 or number 5, which is just referring to the size of the coil. However, Usually this size of zipper, the entire width of the zipper is approximately 1¼ inch. Now for the other zippers, you're going to need 3 8-inch or 20 centimeter pieces of zipper tape with a single pull, again, number 4.5 or number 5 coil zipper. So that's this one here, and also this zipper inside. So that's all that you're going to need in terms of supplies. And please remember that when you are shopping, all the quantities may vary depending on where you've decided to use everything and also the width of the fabric that you are purchasing. So make sure that you get a little extra if possible. Before we get started on cutting and interfacing our pieces, let's go over the supply list very quickly. You're going to need 1/2 yard of the exterior fabric or 1/2 meter. I've decided to use this print as my exterior fabric, and it is a 7-ounce cotton canvas. You're also going to need 1/2 yard or 1/2 meter of your contrast fabric. And I'm going to be using this faux leather for my contrast fabric. And then you're going to need 1 yard of lining fabric. Now that could be all one fabric or a combination. I always like to use a combination because I like contrast between the main lining and my pocket linings. So I've decided for the main part of the lining, I'm going to use this waterproof canvas. And I'm going to use this cotton fabric for all of my pocket linings. Now, in total, you'll need 1 yard or 1 meter, or just a little slightly less than 1 meter. If you're splitting it up, then you're going to have to figure out how much you need of each. I probably used 1/2 meter of each, approximately. Next, you're going to need a lightweight fusible woven interfacing. You could use a light or a medium weight. You'll need about 1 yard or 1 meter of it. And that will vary quite a lot depending on your choice of material. So I'm going to go through that when I go through the cutting of the pieces, because in my case, I'm going to need less than 1 yard. So I'm going to go over that so you can see, you can estimate exactly how much you're going to need. Now, if like me, you've decided to use a canvas fabric, or for your exterior fabric, if you're deciding to use canvas fabric like I am, you're going to also need a little bit of fusible fleece. Due to the height of the main body pieces, you're going to need 1/2 yard, but you're going to probably have a lot left over. So 1/2 yard or 1/2 meter of fusible fleece if you're using cotton fabric for your exterior fabric. 1 piece of firm sew-in stabilizer, just 9 inches by 6.5 inches, or approximately 22.9 centimeters by 16.5 centimeters. And I'm using Pellon Peltex 70, which is a sew-in firm stabilizer. And then entirely optional, but if you'd like to add a heavyweight fusible interfacing to any of your faux leather pieces, if you're using faux leather for your contrast, you're going to need a heavyweight fusible interfacing. So that's going to also vary a lot. Like maybe you're only going to want to add some to your zipper panels, or if you want to do the zipper panels and the gusset, then you're going to need a bit more. So assuming that it is approximately 42 inches wide, you're going to need 1/2 yard to 1 yard, really depending on where you choose to use it, which is close to 1/2 meter to 1 meter. So that's really going to vary a lot. Once you see all of my pieces cut, you can see where you'll need to apply it and figure out how much you're going to need from that. And I did do one sample piece. This is just from a different bag that I was working on, and it does have that heavyweight fusible, and you'll see that I trimmed away the seam allowance from that heavyweight fusible before I fused it to the wrong side. Now, again, be very careful if you are fusing to a faux leather or a vinyl. that you use a Teflon sheet or a pressing cloth, and that you do a test on a small sample piece to make sure that the heat required to fuse does not melt your material. So that's really important that you do that before you even attempt it. If you're not sure, I would just omit it. And like I showed you with my sample bag, it works just fine with that bag with no heavyweight fusible at all. So if you're doing the removable strap with hardware, you're going to need two 1.5-inch O-rings and two 1.5-inch swivels. And then for both versions, it's optional, but I'm going to be adding some purse feet. So you'll need 4 purse feet. Now in this video, I'm going to show you how to do both versions of the strap. If you're going to do the permanent strap with webbing, then you're going to need a piece. It's according to your personal preference, of course. My piece here is 36 inches long, but I recommend 36 to 43 inches of 1.5-inch wide webbing, or 38 millimeter wide if you're working with metric. And then the last thing you're going to need are some zippers. So for your main zipper closure, you need a 15-inch or 38 centimeter piece of zipper tape with a single pull. I'm using a number 5 zipper. That's referring to the width of your coil, but a 4.5 will also work. And then for the 3 zipper pockets, we have 1 interior and 2 exterior. They all use the same size zipper. It's an 8-inch piece of zipper tape with a single pull, or if you're working in metric, a 20 centimeter piece of zipper tape. Now the next thing we're going to do is prepare our pattern pieces. So before you start, you should read the entire pattern at least once, preferably twice, but make sure that you read the entire pattern before we start. For printing out your pattern pieces, make sure that you're printing them in Adobe Reader on regular size paper. Now, I know if you're not in North America, you have A4 paper, that's fine. Any size paper, regular size paper will work. Just make sure that you set your scaling to actual size, not 100%. So that is a little option in Adobe Reader. When the print dialog box comes up, make sure that you've selected actual size. Now, the final pattern piece on page 18, you're going to want to print out 2 copies. So that is this piece here. So you want 2 copies printed out of this one. And then there are some pieces that we're going to tape together. I'll show you that in a moment. But if you do not like cutting on the fold, I know some love it, some do not love it. You can print out 2 copies of the main body pieces. So that's these 2 here. Okay, so you can print out another set of these pieces, and you can make one entire large piece. And you can do the same thing for the gusset zipper pocket, which is this piece. So you could print out 2 copies and then tape them together at the fold line. But if you'd rather just not get confused and just do them as I've got them here, so just print out 1 copy of everything except for this piece, which you will want to print out twice no matter what. And that's on page 18. So you definitely need 2 of these. So when I'll just start with the main body here. So when I am taping pieces together, so in my patterns, I use little flower symbols, or sometimes it's a star, and that indicates that these 2 lines need to be taped together. Now, I don't cut them both right at the dash line. I leave a little extra paper on one of the pieces only. So this one here, I'm going to cut out right at the dash line, but this one, I'm going to leave that extra little bit of paper at the top. Okay, like this. And then what I do is it creates a little bit of an overlap, and that makes your pattern piece stronger, because if you cut them both at the dash line and then tape them together, I find the pieces of tape with age, they start to kind of split, and then your pattern pieces fall apart. So by doing this little overlap, you're kind of preventing that from happening by making it a little bit more durable here at the taped line. Okay, and then again, just at the top of the overlap, I'll add another piece of tape. And then I can go ahead and finish cutting this out. Now again, if you don't like cutting on the fold, you could have another set of these pieces. And then I would leave a little bit of paper along this line so I could do that little overlap again and then tape them together at the fold line. But that is up to you whether you want to do that or not. The other piece that needs to be taped together, there are two others. So there's gusset and gusset zipper bottom. And this is why you need to have printed out two of these pieces. So one of them is going to be taped to this one, and the other one's going to be taped to this one. So you see it has the star symbol here and this sunshine symbol here. So those will be taped together exactly like I did for the main body. Now, using the cutting chart provided in the pattern, I'm going to go through all of the different pieces that we are going to cut out and what is required in terms of interfacing for each. So we're going to start, I'm going to go in order, and you'll see that I crossed off a lot of things because I'm using a waterproof canvas for my lining, for example, and so I know for those pieces I will not be using fusible woven interfacing. I also know that I will not require the fusible woven interfacing because for my contrast, I've chosen to use a faux leather, and so I will not be using that interfacing on those pieces as well. So I'll go through that as I'm going through all of the various pieces that I've cut out. So the first one is the main body pieces. So that's using this pattern piece here. This is a cut on the fold piece. So with this, I've cut out my two exterior fabric. And again, that is that cotton canvas. So I will definitely also want to cut two pieces of fusible woven interfacing that is going to be fused to the wrong side of these. And then I'm also going to need the fusible fleece for these pieces. Now, if you're not sure if your machine likes bulky seams or not, you may want to trim the seam allowance from the fusible fleece pieces before you fuse them on top of the fusible woven interfacing. So when you're fusing, you're first adding the fusible woven interfacing, and then you're adding the fusible fleece on top of that. Now, whether you trim the seam allowance or not from the fusible fleece, that's up to you. I will not be doing it because I know my machine is fine with seams that are a little bit bulkier. Then the last thing I'm going to need is two lining fabric. Now, I'm using waterproof canvas, so as I mentioned, I will not be using fusible woven interfacing, but if you've decided to go with a cotton fabric for your lining, make sure that you also cut two fusible woven interfacing for your lining pieces. Next up on the list is the gusset zipper top. So I am going to be using this faux leather for the two contrast fabric pieces that will be on the exterior, and then one lining fabric piece that will be on the interior of the bag. None of these pieces require fusible woven interfacing, so I will not be cutting any of that whatsoever for these. That means I also do not require fusible fleece, and I've decided to not use heavyweight fusible on my vinyl exterior pieces. So you will cut whichever pieces you need based on what you've selected. So if all three pieces in your bag will be made out of cotton fabric, then you will need to cut everything on the cut list. But if, like me, you're choosing to use material that does not require interfacing, then you will only cut your one lining piece and your two contrast pieces. Next on the list is the gusset zipper bottom, and this is going to be exactly as it is for the gusset zipper top. So the cutting list is identical for both. So again, I'm only having to cut two contrast pieces and one lining piece, and they are all in materials that do not require fusible woven interfacing or fusible fleece. And I've decided to not use the heavyweight fusible because I want my bag to be very, very soft. Now, I did show you this earlier. This is my gusset firm interfacing piece, and that is cut to measurements. There's no pattern piece, and it's 9 inches by 6.5 inches, or 22.9 centimeters by 16.5 centimeters. And I've used Pellon Peltex 70, which is a sew-in interfacing. I will be gluing it to my gusset pieces later on during the assembly of the bag. Next up is the gusset zipper pocket. So there is a pattern piece, but I've also given you the measurements if you prefer to cut to measurements because it is a large rectangle piece. So for this one, I am using cotton fabric. So I will cut exactly what the cutting list says, 3 lining fabric and 3 fusible woven interfacing. So I'll be using this as my lining fabric, and then here's my matching fusible woven interfacing. Next is the zipper panel pieces. They are cut to measurements. There is no pattern piece. They are 14.5 inches by 3.25 inch, or if you're working in metric, 34.3 centimeters by 6.4 centimeters. And there are two contrast pieces and 2 lining pieces. Again, because I have selected material that does not require fusible woven interfacing, I will not be cutting any of those. But for your bag, whichever pieces you've selected to use a cotton fabric, you should be also cutting a matching fusible woven interfacing. And then optionally, if you would like to use fusible fleece, for example, if your contrast is a canvas cotton, then you'll also want to cut fusible fleece for these, or you could use a heavyweight fusible. So you have 2 options. The fusible fleece will make it more pliable, and the heavyweight fusible will make it slightly more structured. So those are really optional for you. I've chosen to not use anything at all for my bag, just like I have for the other pieces. So next is the zipper panel interfacing, which I do not have any. It's slightly smaller than the zipper panel pieces, and it would look just like this piece here. So this is another zipper panel piece that I created, and it has the zipper panel interfacing fused to the wrong side, which I cut out of a heavyweight fusible cotton interfacing. So I already talked about that, so I won't repeat myself, but this is what that would look like if you decided to do that. For your handles, these are cut to measurements. There are no pattern pieces. I will be using my contrast fabric, and they will end up being 1 inch wide handles. So when you're cutting the pieces, you want to cut pieces that are 4 inches wide by 16 inches long. When you're cutting straps and handles, it's always better to cut parallel to the selvage, not perpendicular, because when it's parallel, they tend to have less stretch. So that would be a little tip to when you're cutting these pieces out. So they are 4 inches wide, 16 inches long, or 10.2 centimeters by 40.6 centimeters. So for the double slip pocket, this is a very long piece. Hopefully you can see it all on camera. But it is 8 inches by 30 inches, or 20.3 centimeters by 56 centimeters. And I'm using a cotton fabric, so I have also cut out a matching piece of fusible woven interfacing that I'll fuse to the wrong side. I just realized that I forgot to show you the gusset. I skipped right over that. So there is only one gusset piece, and that is out of your lining fabric. If you're using waterproof canvas like I am, you won't need the fusible woven interfacing. So if you're using cotton fabric, then you'll also cut out a piece of fusible woven interfacing. And because in this video, I am going to show you how to create both shoulder strap options. If you're doing the permanent strap, you're going to have your piece of 1.5 inch wide webbing cut to the length of your choice. I've cut mine at 36 inches. And then you're also going to cut out of your contrast fabric a little piece of webbing cuff. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is the webbing cuff here on this bag. So you'll want two pieces, and those are cut by measurements, 3 inches wide by 4 inches high, or 7.6 centimeters by 10.2 centimeters. And because I'm using a faux leather, no fusible woven interfacing on these. If you decided to use fabric, you may want to interface them, but it's not entirely necessary because they're just covering this seam end of the strap. If you're using the contrast fabric for your shoulder strap, then you're going to cut that. Mine is 3 inches wide by 54 inches long. However, you can cut yours according to the length that you will prefer for yourself. Just remember that the length measurement is going to be half of what you've cut, because we are going to sew this strap in a loop. So this is actually a loop, like this. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You want to cut double the length of your final strap length. So now I'm going to go ahead and first fuse all of the fusible woven interfacing to the wrong side of my matching cotton pieces. And then for my two main body canvas pieces, I'm then going to fuse the fusible fleece. If you are decided to use a heavyweight fusible or fusible fleece on more fabric pieces within your bag, you're going to also want to fuse those on top of a fusible woven interfacing, or if you're fusing heavyweight to any faux leather pieces, then you're going to want to do that just on the wrong side, no fusible woven interfacing. Now I just want to show you quickly all of these pieces on the bag. So these are your zipper panels, your main body pieces, your gusset zipper bottom, your gusset zipper top, your handles, your shoulder strap. Inside the bag, you again have two main panels, two zipper panels, gusset zipper top, gusset zipper bottom, full gusset piece, double slip pocket, and then inside each of the zipper pockets, that will be your gusset, your zipper pocket lining pieces.